So welcome, everyone. I'm Debbie Masters. I'm the university librarian, and it's just a pleasure to welcome you all to our library. Now, how many of you are actually students? Okay, then. And how many of you have been to the library? At least 50 times. Okay, then. Yes. So this is our special collections reading room. You may not have had a chance to be here, but this is where, if you're going to use some of the special collections in your research projects, you would be doing it here with the help of our faculty and staff who work in this area. It's the next to the last week of classes. Students are really busy, so thank you so much for coming and enjoying this event with us. For those of you who are standing, the audio will be also available outside the room, and you can pull up some chairs around it if you like. We do monitor the capacity of this room to make sure we don't exceed the allowable size. And for those of you who are visitors to campus, I do invite you to explore the library, both our own J. Paul Leonard Library that belongs to San Francisco State, and also the Sutro Library that's on the 5th and 6th floors of this building. They're all wonderful resources for you, and we welcome you to enjoy them. So that's my welcome to the library, but I'd also like to introduce our Vice President for University Advancement, Robert Nava, who would like to offer his welcome on behalf of President Wong to the campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie Masters, and good afternoon, Gators. This is really an exciting afternoon. Having the Lieutenant Governor here with us at San Francisco State. Gavin, welcome back to your university, San Francisco State.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
Let me say this. Before we get started, I have very brief comments because we're really here to listen to the Lieutenant Governor and his ideas. But I did want to take a moment and also acknowledge our former president, Dr. Robert Corrigan, who's here with us. Dr. Corrigan. Thank you, Dr. Corrigan. We owe so much to you, Bob, for your leadership of this institution over the last 24 years, so thank you.
But he did fight against those tuition increases. I was there, so
well,
he deserves a lot of credit.
Lieutenant Governor, I did want to say to the students, and you know the leadership that the Lieutenant Governor has been providing. Lieutenant Governor attends the board meetings of both the UC Regents and also the CSU trustees, and Gavin is constantly there advocating for openness, access, and for the interest of our students. And Gavin, we appreciate your advocacy for public higher education. Thank you for that. Finally, colleagues, I just wanted to bring greetings on behalf of our president, Dr. Les Wong. Dr. Wong is traveling today. He was very, very pleased that the Lieutenant Governor was going to be with us, having this talk this afternoon. So I bring greetings to you, Lieutenant Governor, on behalf of President Wong. And I wanted just to mention, as we get into the conversation, the topic, the book, and your ideas have stimulated such conversation nationally about the role of democracy and citizens in this period of technology. And the kind of ideas that you're promoting and discussing, they're important not only to the broader citizens and residents of this country, but I'd like to also explore at some point how the ideas also impact a university setting. You know, the university is a city in itself, and the role of technology is transforming how we deliver classes, how students interface with their faculty and with the administration, and how we connect with our alumni all over the world. So Gavin, I think you've opened up some really interesting ideas about the role of democracy in the 21st century, but also how we can maybe extend that within the context of higher education. So with that, I'm going to stop and say it's great to have the Lieutenant Governor here. Anytime he's on campus or any place, it's like a rock star. You know, as I was coming, all the students were around the Lieutenant Governor, and you know, you're a rock star, Gavin. This institution is proud of you. This city is proud of you, and the state of California is proud of you. Ladies and gentlemen, please, warm welcome to our Lieutenant Governor, Gavin Newsom. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Well, I'm just going to take off since that's as good as it's going to get. So thank you. A lot of fun. Good. A couple people are happy I'm out of here, I see. Get back to school. All right.
So I just want to let you know who's moderating the conversation initially and subsequently, and that's Jarrell Iseman. Jarrell Iseman has served as the director of the San Francisco State Institute for Civic and Community Engagement since 2007. Each year, the Institute provides opportunities for university faculty and thousands of students to address issues of community-defined needs through community service learning and civic engagement. In a prior position, he served as the first service learning faculty scholar in the California State University Chancellor's Office, where he developed service learning initiatives throughout the CSU. And perhaps apropos of today's discussion, Professor Iseman has previously served as the chair of the Computer Science Department in the early 90s, when he and other faculty founded SFSU Net, a campus community electronic communication program that helped create internet connections at schools, nonprofit agencies, and minority-owned businesses. At one point in the early days of the internet, he offered university email accounts to all members of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, an act for which he got in trouble with some of the campus computing administrators and a few of his library colleagues, too. Dr. Iseman will now introduce our honored guest, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, and moderate the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Vice President Nava, Dr. Corrigan, colleagues, students, and guests. This is going to be a wonderful conversation. Let me introduce the Lieutenant Governor. Elected in 2010, Gavin Newsom is the 49th Lieutenant Governor of the state of California, following 2 terms as mayor of San Francisco, where he was the youngest mayor of the city in more than 100 years. As mayor, he led the city to an economic recovery by making it a center for biotech and clean technology. He has been a tireless advocate for the homeless, championing comprehensive policies and action through programs such as Project Homeless Connect. And he has also been an entrepreneur, founding 15 small businesses in the San Francisco Bay Area after graduating from Santa Clara University. Today, we will be discussing his new book, Citizenville, How to Take the Town Square Digital and Reinvent Government. It is the story of how ordinary citizens can use new digital tools to dissolve political gridlock and transform American democracy. As social networking and smartphones have changed the way we communicate with one another, these technologies are also changing our relationship with government. The book is filled with exciting examples around 3 central themes, each of which we will try to touch on today. The first theme is about open data. There is so much data in government that could be put into the public domain, and software developers who have the skills and tools could develop applications to use this data to serve the public good. And we'll talk about some of those examples. The second big idea is participatory democracy, utilizing all the Web 2.0 tools that are now available to us through Facebook and Twitter, etc. We have ways of communicating with one another and with our government officials that didn't exist before, and this is certainly changing the face of democracy. And the third big idea is how to incentivize engagement. What ways can we find to bring more people into this participation? And each of those, we'll talk about some examples, and then we'll have some questions. I have a few prepared, but of course I'm going to ask the audience for your questions as well. Let's welcome Lieutenant Governor Newsom.
Thanks again. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jarrell. Thank you.
Well, you might not remember, but I had you as a guest here on campus one time before. It's back when you were mayor. We had a rally on campus about public housing in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And you came and graciously gave some eloquent remarks about housing policy.
Yeah.
And ended the day doing some pretty fancy dance moves with Sharon Hewitt on the campus quad.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Remember that
I
day?
actually now specifically remember. Yeah. Wow. I mean, dancing is my life, so it's not surprising. Of course, you've never seen me dance, obviously, you especially. Yeah, thanks.
So I thought we would try to go to each of these big ideas in the book and talk about
Excellent.
them, and ask you to start with maybe some examples of open data in the government that could be utilized in the way you've described to serve the public good.
Well, thank you all. This is great. I didn't know who the heck was going to show up, if anyone was going to show up, and so I'm grateful all of you took the time, and look forward to what you have on your mind, and look forward to a dialogue. And I thank you for your willingness to convene this, and to take the time to read the book. I hope we'll find out and engage in this conversation. Just let me back up and answer the question specifically. You know, I got inspired, I imagine like a lot of you, in 2008 in Barack Obama's campaign. I'd never seen anything like it. 35,000 self-organizing communities coming together across every conceivable and imaginable difference. MyBarackObama.com. It was a mesmerizing campaign, a two-way conversation where you really felt you were part of a movement. Yes, we can. That, of course, culminated on that election day in November with that historic election. And the president-elect wanted to continue the conversation. To his credit, he said, governing is not just getting elected. He wanted to continue the conversation past Election Day. And he transitioned MyBarackObama.com to change.gov. And he wanted to continue the conversation. And he stuck his flag in a town hall meeting where he asked many of you that are in this room, millions others that had organized, what should be my priority, not just for the first 100 days of the next administration, for the next 4 and 8 years. Is it the war? And you can literally look right now on Google change.gov. Is it the war in Iraq, he asked. Is that your top priority? Withdraw our troops. Is it Afghanistan? Is it the war on terror? Is it the financial meltdown? Remember 2008, top of mind. Is it climate change? What's on your mind? Not dissimilar to his wife just a few weeks back. You remember at the Oscars where she took out the envelope. The president-elect infamously had this town hall meeting, unprecedented number of people participating to set the tone and tenor for the next 2 terms in office. What was the number one thing on your mind? Was it war on terror, the challenges of climate change, the financial meltdown? Well, the envelope was opened on that infamous day, and the number one priority of the American people was legalize marijuana. Well, the president had precisely the same response you just had. The difference was the online community and those assembled physically in that town hall didn't think it was so funny, his response, and were actually quite sincere. And as a consequence, the president-elect did something that all of his predecessors would have done. You can forgive him. He turned the site off. He decided to put the site back to be reconstructed and transitioned change.gov to the whitehouse.gov site. That bottom-up campaign, that two-way conversation, yes, we can, was transitioned to a top-down presidency, a broadcast model, yes, he can. And consequence of that was my own frustration, the disconnect that I felt, and my own familiarity with the struggle and challenges an elected official, that we use the tools of technology relatively well to get elected, to amplify voices, to get you engaged, enthusiastic, excited to show up and volunteer, to make a contribution, to show up on election day. But boy, once the election's over, we turn off those voices. You vote, guys like me decide. A broadcast model, top-down form of government. And that's no longer, I argue, and that became the predicate of this book, relevant to the world we're living in. And you all know this because you are living in a world of choice that's being designed and customized around you. You're in a world where literally every one of us can go on with what's in our pocket or in our hands right now and order a book in a nanosecond and have it delivered to our pocket. You could order groceries that could be delivered at your doorstep by the time you leave SF State and make your way across town. You can buy a customized car that arrives and can be delivered in just a day or so. And then you go to the DMV and you're still filling out. By the way, you've all experienced this, still filling out forms in triplicate. It's no longer relevant to the world you're living in. And so that's what this book's about. How do we address this disconnect? How do we address the world we're living in and the world that we're operating in from a governmental perspective? My argument is that government, particularly as it relates to technology, is on the leading and cutting edge of 1973. And by the way, that's literally the year the California DMV substantially upgraded their technology system. 1973. So we have to deal with this disconnect because I argue in the book that government's on a collision course with the future, and we're about to get run over because the world's no longer connected. You all know this. It's hyper-connected. I had a chance just recently, and I apologize for the long answer. I just want to create a foundation for the discussion with Tom Friedman. You've heard of Tom Friedman? Wrote the book, The World's Flat. New York Times bestseller, 2005. I had a chance to meet him on an economic conference we had down in Silicon Valley, and he was our keynote, but we decided to have a conversation instead of listening to a speech. And I asked him, I said, what world, Tom, are we living in? It's a question that he thinks that we don't ask enough in government. What world are we living in? He argues it's the most important question to ask and in turn answer. So I decided to turn the tables. I said, what world are we living in? And he said, Gavin, in 2005. I said, Tom, I know your book, The World is Flat, was on the New York Times bestseller list. He said, yeah, 2005, not 1995. He said, think about this. Go back to my book and look under FA in the index. Facebook is not even in there. 2005. He said, Twitter was a sound. The cloud was in the sky. 4G was a parking space. LinkedIn, a prison. Apps were things you filled out to get it to San Francisco State. Big data was a wrapper, and Skype, for most of us, was a typo. None of those things existed as we know them. They're ubiquitous in our lives. His point, again, no longer connected, but a hyper-connected world. And that's something I think profound in the context of the challenges we face in government and the challenges we face as we transition from a campaign into a governing model where your voice matters and you want to extend that two-way conversation and you want to continue to engage, but you don't have those points of contact. And that's what this book lays out, not just that problem, but specific strategies and, I argue, solutions to address it.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, I know, dangerous to ask me questions.
No, that's a great introduction. It's a little different direction, but we were going to address this anyway. Your example with the legalized marijuana response to the open government is not the most thrilling example of participatory government. We also have many examples in California with our referenda system.
No, that's right.
Which makes us cause pause to think about full participation.
Right.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think nobody in here would question the inevitability of these communication tools to allow us all to communicate with each other and with government. But the big question is, how can this be used to make us a stronger and better democracy when we have these other things, the other challenges as examples?
Yeah. So here's my argument. You know, I think we perpetuate a fraud in government. And I don't use that language lightly, and I know this is being recorded. It is a fraud. We tend to engage you, don't we, during budgets, in a little town hall meeting that 99.9999% of you never participate in, but few percent of you will pick up a paper and go, oh, they had a town hall about the budget. And the mayor or the city administrator, members of the county board of supervisors, the governor for that matter, heck, even the president will say, oh, we had a very engaged participatory process of engagement on our budget. When in fact, that's just not the case. Most folks that show up tended to have stickers. Most folks that showed up, if you've been to a town hall, you've been there, right? You sit in the back and you want to participate and you realize, my gosh, there seems to be 200 people there for the exact same issue. And your voice shrinks. Your physiology shrinks. You tend to sort of work your way towards the back and out the door. You don't feel you were necessarily heard. No, we may have a second town hall meeting in a different part of the city to show that we're culturally competent and truly engaged with the diversity of our city. But it's the same process. It's a one-way conversation. 99.999, I'll use that again, % of the budget was already settled before the mayor, whoever she or he may be, even entered into the room. We call that a participatory process. No, we'll have a little town hall meeting on other topics. Sure, we'll have a city council meeting. The best ones are always the ones that were shortest. Why were they short? Well, no one showed up. We said that was a great meeting. It was only 45 minutes. Sometimes you'll show up, but you're given just a couple of minutes, tops. If there's a lot of you, 1 minute. That's outreach. It's a joke. You know it. That's why you don't have real confidence. You vote, guys like me decide, it's getting a little dull. You're in a world where last night you may have watched Well, not Dancing with the Stars, but you may have watched The Voice, or you may have watched American Idol and those 3 final contestants. You may have voted 10 times last night. But we ask you to vote. You may have voted like, dislike. You may be voting like and dislike right now, listening to me. And then we tell you to show up every 2 or 4 years and vote on election day. We ask you to go to a post office, if they exist, or someone's garage, and here you are tweeting and texting and Facebooking and FaceTiming and tumbling around and Pinteresting and all this stuff, and all of a sudden we give you a little pen and you sort of put across a dot, and then you go back to the real world after we give you a sticker. I mean, it's comical. And so increasingly you're frustrated. I get it. And what you're doing is you're more engaged peer-to-peer than ever. This whole millennial generation. There's a Big Time magazine, a cover story on this that's going to take a controversial perspective. I had a chance to review it, but it's also one that I subscribe to. Your generation's more empathetic, more engaged, smarter than any generation in history, higher IQs, but more disconnected with governing institutions and larger institutions than ever. You're going to Donors Choose to solve your education issues because you're sick and tired of listening to these school board debates. Nothing changes. You're going to kiva.org. You're going to Indiegogo or Kickstarter and crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. You're disintermediating from government. You're going peer-to-peer, solve problems directly. How do we reconnect that? How do we re-engage you in participatory democracy where you're not treated as subjects, where we do things to you, but you're treated respectfully where we do things with you, a two-way conversation? And how can technology, in this case, to the specific question, create a platform for that engagement? Because we know what democracy does. It democratizes voices, allows more people to engage, and provides a platform where you have more points to engage. And how can we reimagine a governing system that moves away from this machine thinking where you put in $1 taxes and you get limited choices, like a vending machine: police, fire, healthcare, education, defense. And if you don't like what you get, you do what every one of you have done. You kick the machine. You shake it, which is the protest movements, the Occupy or Tea Party on whatever side of the political aisle, versus government as a platform, a tool to cultivate and engage and to connect with people in unprecedented ways. So my argument is therein lies the opportunity. Government as a platform, not top-down machine thinking, not top-down thinking at all, bottom-up thinking, coordinating, cultivating, networking, as opposed to centralized, inside out. It's outside in, the pyramid flipping upside down. Not guys like me on top anymore, but all of you on top. Real active citizen engagement, real participatory democracy, recapturing your voice after Election Day, making you feel part of the life of your neighborhood, your community, our state, our nation, and the world we're trying to build.
Thank you.
So I know I should do yes, no answers.
This is what we wanted. In the book, you make a very good comparison between different levels of government and how effective they could be with this kind of participation. I think we've seen the most effectiveness at the local level. The state level we can talk about, but let's start talking about some of the biggest problems at the federal level and see if these tools that are now available to us can help us address those issues. I have a friend taking a course in American democracy at Stanford University. Actually, it's through a MOOC offered by Stanford University. There's 100.
How many of you heard of MOOCs? Interesting.
We'll get to the MOOC question. We'll get to the MOOC question later. But there's 150,000 students in the class. The professor laid out the 3 big problems with American democracy. 1, money in politics.
Yes.
2, gerrymandering,
Yes.
which has created districts in which only the incumbents can get reelected.
Right.
And 3rd, access to the ballot. There's a lot of rules being put in front of people, preventing them from actually getting to vote.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at those 3 big problems,
Yeah.
which have disenfranchised voters and created this condition that you talk about where we are frustrated with government, and ask the question, how does this ability to communicate with one another and to organize electronically allow us to address problems like those?
Yeah. Well, you know, this book started out as a book about technology and governance, became a book about citizenship, active citizen engagement. And then at the end, I realized it's really a book about leadership and my own struggle and frustration with the guy or gal on the white horse that's going to come save the day. And we put all our energies into that guy or gal who's going to come and save the day. And so often we get disappointed. Over and over and over again, we get disappointed. And it connects right to this question. Why? I mean, why is President Obama said you can't change the players, you got to change the game. And why has he struggled to change the game? Well, it's for all of those reasons that were just cited and some others. I would argue the parties are a big problem in all of this as well, including my party, my Democratic Party. And therein lies the great challenge. How do we address this? Because I'm frustrated because I see those campaigns and those campaign commercials. I get just as excited as all of you. You know, we're all quoting Lincoln, right? Because we all saw the movie Lincoln in politics. Remember, Democrats lost the election a few years back, the majority, and we all were quoting the Bible and listening to country music. Literally go back and hear our leaders all call. I was always a Toby Keith fan. Then it turned out he was a Democrat, and the Republicans got upset with that. But that's another topic. So now we're all quoting Lincoln because it was so contemporary. But Lincoln had a great quote. He said, we're all born originals, but we die copies. I'll repeat that because it's really powerful, I think. We're all born originals, but we die copies. And I think of that in the context of these campaigns. All that originality, all that energy, the authenticity, all that quality of imagination, a campaign, you're like, this is the change we do seek. And then they get into office, all that originality starts disappearing. Second term, they're termed out, and you go, my gosh, they were just termed out like everybody else. Born originals, died copies. It's as if governing de-geniuses you. So what is it about governing that de-geniuses you? And therein lies these examples. The persuasion industry dominates. Dominates. Elected officials are rather trivial in government at the highest levels, federal and state. And that's why I argue that the only form of government that seems to still work relatively well is local government, because you can out-hustle. But boy, you get in the state of California, $2.2 million a week to saturate TV in Southern California. You can't out-hustle unless you can out-hustle for more money. And who the hell's going to start writing those big checks? People with a real stake in the game. The persuasion industry. Big lobbyists and their suitors on all sides of the political aisle. It's rigged. As is the districts. They're locked in for another decade. I mean, look at the gun control debate. It's so predictable. Doesn't matter what 91% of Americans think. That's trivial. Not when you're locked down in an ideological battle with your party's interest. And the only problem you'll have is a general election, or wait, got that backwards, the primary, where someone more ideologically pure can run against you because you've got a district where the general's already predetermined. And you saw with the new census, every 10 years, we redistrict for another 10 years. They're locked in. And who redistricts? Those in charge and their party sponsors. This thing is broken. And that's why we have so much poverty, ignorance, and disease. That's why we have the highest poverty rates in America and California. That's why we have 38.5% of our kids living in poverty in Fresno, California, your own state. This is why things in so many ways are more vexing and problematic. And we only play in the margins. And until we radically alter that power structure, we're just going to promote and promise things we can never deliver. So technology, to the question, what does it provide? It provides access and information that only was in the hands of the elite and the powerful. And that information can be organized and used in a bottom-up way to radically alter the playing field. I have a chapter called Armies of Davids, and the slingshot here is technology. The populist movements that are bubbling up around the world, not just the Facebook youth of Tahrir Square, but the indignados in Spain, the Weibo bloggers in China, 260 plus million strong, that cannot be suppressed by a government that spends more money suppressing their own domestic voices than they do on national security. That's an interesting fact. to what's happened here with populist movements, what's left of the Occupy movement, and of course, what's still pumping along the Tea Party movement. Something dramatic is taking shape here. The industrial economy is running out of steam. Big is getting small, and small is getting big. You see it everywhere. Newspapers. They were dominant just a few years ago. Newspapers are all completely reimagining their business model. Publishing, I'm now learning it the hard way. Look at the music industry. You know, it wasn't just radicals like Sean Parker in fights with our friends from Marin County at Metallica a few years ago. It was Steve Jobs who said, you know what? I don't think all of you have to buy albums anymore. I'm going to make a deal with the music industry and you can just download songs. Technology is radically altering the playing field. You're seeing the same thing in areas of, financial services. I have an old uncle. You have an uncle like this who talks about the good old days, be on the second or third martini in the afternoon, probably 2 or 3 in the afternoon, maybe this fourth. Talk about when 10 years ago, as a stockbroker, you didn't have a choice. You had to go through them. You're going to buy a stock. All of a sudden, Chuck Schwab comes along and E-Trade. Technology radically altering, creating more choices, more opportunity to engage. Transportation, the debates we're having with Uber and Lyft versus the incumbent and entrenched interests, the big top-down centralized interest of the taxi cab industry. This is a punctuation point in history. This is not some cyclical change. Something radical is taking shape in real time, not connected but hyper-connected. And government doesn't have a clue what's coming. We're still operating in an industrial mindset. Again, machine thinking, top-down centralized, not bottom-up. The thinking that got you into this university and that is going to move your world and the one you're trying to build forward.
You make a good case for this change of technology being dramatic and historic. You've said that this change will empower us as citizens to change our government. But there's the question of who will then be the power around these new tools. In the book, you talk about digital natives, and I think we're looking at a lot of digital natives here today.
Yes, there are a few immigrants. I'm one of them. We're learning the language of technology. You were born digital, most of you.
The question we're all interested in is, with these new tools, how do we close that digital gap? How do we cross the digital divide?
Well, I remember I went to Santa Clara, as you may have heard, and you didn't boo, and I appreciate that. Jesuit University. I've kind of upset my Catholic base, as you can imagine, some of my politics. But, I remember, I say that to say this. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, and I kid you not, about 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, she couldn't walk, she couldn't talk. She's 1. And she had found my iPad. And I'm just watching her flip through this. You've seen this with your sons or daughters, nieces, nephews, your brothers or sisters. She's flying through. She had everything but my wife's credit card. And I literally just stop on a dime. I'm just watching quietly. Someone can't talk or walk. And I called my wife. I said, I knew it. We're Catholic. I said, I knew it. This is the one. The prodigy, she's arrived. I knew she'd be a girl too, honey. Here she is. Until we brought her to preschool 6 months later. And I looked around and every single one of these kids were doing the same thing. Not prodigies, they're just wired totally differently. You cannot educate my daughter like I was educated. I mean, the idea that we still have, and I say respectfully, education system with rows of desks, with bells that were ringing during Ben Franklin's time, with single subjects, and I say this respectfully, Professor, with professors on stage, the sage on the stage lecturing to you, and you pulling out your pen and paper and taking verbatim notes of what we had to say and dispense to you. And you're all in the same classroom based on your date of manufacture, your birth date, is laughable. And here we are having an educational debate in this state and country about tenure and seniority. What? I mean, who cares? How about reimagining a 21st century education system? You can have your tenure and seniority, and you're playing tiddlywinks. You're in the margins, folks. it's no longer relevant to the world we're living in. You got to flip these classrooms. You got to customize your curriculum. Forget fast food model of education, mass education. Again, that goes to what's wrong with government generally. A world that's being designed around you, customized around you. Educationally, we have to wake up to that reality as well in every form of delivery from whatever institution. I have about 1,000 employees in my business. I learned the hard way that one-way conversations are dead years ago. My customers want choice, and they want a voice, and they want to participate and engage. We wouldn't be in business if we didn't reconcile that and recognize that. Government needs to reconcile that and recognize that. And so we lay out in this book, and this is not just a way of avoiding an answer and encouraging you to buy the book so you can read the answer. Could be. But very specific strategies to address these issues, to find ways to engage you, and for you to have fun, and to participate in ways where you're not even realizing how valuable your participation is because it just seems so natural and intuitive to what you're doing day in and day out already.
There is a wonderful example in the book of a flipped classroom at the primary school level. But those words have a certain meaning to us here at the university, especially in the current conversation.
I know.
Our good sister university at San Jose State piloted the flipped classroom idea using MOOC as the source of material for the class and then having the students discuss what they heard on the online in a classroom discussion. We're not so sure that's a better model for education.
Yeah. I'm not sure either, but one thing I am convinced of, serving on the CSU Board of Trustees and the UC Board of Regents and trying to be a student of this, is the model that we have for higher education is insolvent. We just don't know it yet. I mean, Jesus, we've tripled your tuition since 2001, 383%. Someone told me the other day, said, update your numbers. Doubled it since 2007. We're going to have a debate in the next few months about increasing your tuition again. We don't want to admit that publicly. We're only having that private conversation. The state is substantively out of the business of funding UC. It's about 11% of the UC system is funded by the public. So 89% of it is de facto privatized or comes internally through tuition and other fees. You're doing a little bit better, but not in relation to all the cuts we've experienced in the last few years. And we're in an area of austerity where the likelihood that you're going to see substantial increase in funding is pretty nominal. So something dramatic has to happen. So therein lies some of the more creative ways of trying to create access and points of engagement, deal with bottleneck courses, deal with remediation issues, because a lot of us coming out of the community college system or even out of K through 12, even if you went to Lowell High School, which is harder to get into than Harvard, have some remediation issues. How can you begin to address some of those basic courses by using these tools of technology that you're naturally engaged and intuitively understand to begin to address that in a more creative manner? It's tough stuff. It's a radical change and departure from the way things have been done for centuries. I mean, the biggest breakthrough in public education was chalk in the last 500 years. And you say, all right, maybe not chalk, PowerPoint, but that's about it. It's not so damn different than it was. We can go back to a big college classroom, the way it looked, honestly, 500-600 years ago. So I know it's difficult. I say this lovingly and respectfully. It's not because you're not doing a great job. This is the finest public university system on the planet, CSU and UC. We're the model and envy of the world. You guys are the best of the best, the elite. But we have to wake up to the reality that the world is radically changing. And we're leaving hundreds of thousands of people behind every year in California alone, millions behind across this country. And we're not educating people up to and past technology anymore. The biggest complaint you get, and I do economic development work, 1.75 million people can't find work that are actively seeking in California. There are check a look, go simplyhired.com right now and press California. And you'll see 500,000 job openings in California. How is that possible? There are 500,000 job openings today. And there's 1.7 million people finally, because we're not conveying enough talent to meet the needs of a world that's radically altered. We've got to reimagine and redesign this system. So MOOCs are part of it. They're not the solution. There is no one solution. But I think we should have an iterative process where we try some pilots. I appreciate the leadership at SF State in the past on technology. You guys are not immune from using technology to engage. I appreciate the work Cal State East Bay and now at San Jose State that's really jumping in. And we'll learn from this experiment and these iterative opportunities of engagement. I think it's healthy. And that doesn't make me popular with faculty. I get that, but that's why we have to be respectful to faculty. I believe in the blended model. It's not substituting your experience that you're having here just online. I am not for that. But I am about a blended model of engagement. And I do think there's a lot of merits to flipping the classroom where teachers are coaches and mentors. Or not lined up in rows of desks listening to lectures. You could do that in your off time and you could fast forward things you already know. Or more importantly, if you're me, who was getting C-minuses most of my days, I'd like to rewind so I can catch up. That seems to me a model that captures more folks and raises the bar for everybody.
I want to make sure we have some time to talk about some issues about local government and the effective use of technology with data that's made available to process, because there's some really wonderful examples in the book, like Manor, Texas.
Yeah, I love Manor. So here's the big idea. Ronald Reagan, you heard of him? Just checking my audience. You guys are young, I know. I was in an audience the other day, half the people didn't know what Prop 13 was, so trust me, I have to ask these questions. So Ronald Reagan, in many respects, is the godfather of the open data movement. He took satellites, right? You funded satellites. We put those satellites up with your tax dollars, your parents, your grandparents. All these things are sitting up there, and we were holding and hoarding all the data that they were collecting. Fascinating, fantastic data. It was mostly going through NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Agency. Was in our hands. It was in our vaults. You didn't have access to it unless you were working for the government, even though you funded it. Interestingly, Reagan, for whatever reason, decided to open up those data sets and said, you know what? We're going to release all that satellite data. It is the reason that every single one of you can go on your smartphone right now and take a look at what the weather's going to look like this weekend. It's the reason every single one of you were able to use your navigation system on your car, your parents' car, or your rental, and figure out how to get from point A to point B. We have GPS as a consequence of it. We have the Weather Channel, and we have spawned literally billions and billions of jobs of economic growth in this country as a consequence. What else exists in the vaults of government, in the library systems, here at SF State? What other data can be put up online and mashed up by the private sector with similar results? Fire departments, departments of building inspection, recreation and parks departments. Large agencies, small agencies across government, hoarding all this data. How do we put these data sets online? And so that's why, as you noted when we opened, this book's about open government, real transparency, putting all this data in a machine-readable way so you can download it, and then you can do what folks are already doing on their Android platforms or their iPhone platforms, and that's mash up the data and create an app. Government, though, doesn't do that. We go through procurement. If we want to improve the DMV website, we put out an RFQ after we put out an RFI, and then we'll have an RFP. You can ask me later what those are, and I'm not lying. And then we will put up an appropriation through an appropriation cycle, and then we'll get bids, and most likely it won't be the most responsive bid, so we'll probably have to put it back out to bid and go through another appropriation cycle. A year or two passes. Meanwhile, you all maybe intimately experienced this, where your 13-year-old niece over the weekend designed her own fancy website for free. And government now has just spent $1 million procuring one over a year and a half. It's insane. You cannot make this up. And by the way, I give you 4 examples that will blow your minds of inefficiency and waste that are within the last 6 months in state government that should scare the hell out of every one of you. That said, what about an app store for government? Just like you have an app store on your Android platform or your iPhone. What about allowing people to literally come up with solutions and ideas that government officials never even realized were concerns or problems? Places like Manor, Texas, they do that. They looked at government as a platform, and they created a civic currency of sorts where they encouraged active citizen engagement and citizen contribution along the lines of what you're working with Daniel Holmesy at NEN and others to encourage volunteerism, to encourage engagement. And they created InnoBucks, just as one fun example, where you're actually given virtual dollars that can then be translated in the physical world to discounts at participating restaurants or other retailers as ways of encouraging civic contribution, using technology as a platform of engagement, connecting people to projects and connecting people to one another, using data sets to create apps to solve problems we never knew existed. Today, literally, very exciting, President Obama announced today an historic open data initiative. I mean, you couldn't, as the guy who wrote a book about this, you couldn't even, this is like my appendix, and that, or not literally, but for if I ever did a paperback version, I'll add this in there as an update. A massive open data initiative just to, again, require these data sets to go out there that now are available to all of you to come up with creative solutions, again, that none of us could have imagined. And how much that costs taxpayers? Nothing. You go to San Francisco's website, we have one of those examples, which we advanced many years ago. Hundreds and hundreds of apps that cost absolutely nothing, that solve problems that government could only have solved with millions and millions of dollars. It's a whole new movement of civic engagement and civic volunteerism that I think is very, very exciting.
I have to take a moment to give a pitch for the National Day of Civic Hacking, which we're hosting here at the campus, June 1st and 2nd. There'll be 3 sites in San Francisco, but there'll be sites all across the country where these kinds of data sets will be available, and we'll be asking developers to build apps to solve local problems. It's going to be very, very exciting. Let's well, go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's because I want to just finish one other thought. I'm sorry for being so long-winded, but it's an important thought for me. I talked about the days of the guy or gal on the white horse come save the day are over, if they ever existed at all. Because I just don't buy it, though we always buy into it, and I hope you buy into it during my re-election. It's the best I've got. But, you know, I had my political hero growing up was Bobby Kennedy. I just read his speeches. And the reason I say this is to make the point I was making earlier. So much changes and so little changes. He gave a speech out here in the East Bay describing conditions around Bayview Hunters Point 40 years ago. I swear to you, if I read that speech at your commencement next week, I'd get a standing damn ovation. Because he described conditions 40 years ago that are precisely the way you can describe them today. What has substantively changed? Give me a break. Bobby Kennedy, Cesar Chavez, these were the folks that were the pictures, the icons on my wall as I was growing up. So my father was always interested as a judge in the issue of leadership, but he never subscribed, nor did he ever encourage me to get into politics. And he made this argument. Others have made similar arguments. He used to joke. Tom Peters, a business writer, wrote about this as well. Said, what did Gandhi, you've heard of him, Dr. King, Mandela, and the bonus, Václav Havel, all have in common at the peak of their influence? I'll repeat. Gandhi, King, Mandela, and Václav Havel, at the peak of their influence, what did they all share in common? And I'd go on and try to describe, Gandhi, I saw the movie, Dad. Yeah, Mandela, the whole thing. And he would make the case, as was just made. At the peak of their influence, the one thing they all did share in common was jail time. It's exactly right. And they shared one other thing. They exercised their moral authority. They didn't wait to be something to do something. They didn't wait to become elected officials or appointed officials to change the world. They didn't ask for permission. And you say, well, hold on. What's he talking about? Mandela was president. And for those of you that know the bonus, so was Havel of Czechoslovakia. Read Havel's own words. Some of the most, he's a brilliant writer. He writes about his struggles to govern. I mean, heck, he would have used the phrase, governing degeniuses you. Mandela served just one term. Their influence was profoundly more significant when they did not have formal authority and they exercised their moral authority. So what's leadership? Where are the real leaders? They sure as hell weren't found after Sandy Hook and background check debate, which lowered the bar so much because we weren't even having the debate around magazine clips and assault weapons anymore. They sure as heck aren't around as it relates to radically reorienting a public education system for the 20th century, let alone the 21st that we're living in. So I encourage you to think about that in the context of your own roles and responsibility to manifest the change that you're hoping to see. The reason I imagine some of you are even here. Why would you waste your time being here? But don't wait for the guy or gal on the white horse. And don't wait to be something to do something, is the point. And that's what this book ultimately for me was about. It's about reimagining what leadership is all about and using these tools of technology to network like-minded people gives you a profound platform that none of us could have, again, imagined just a few years ago. So it's an extraordinarily exciting time to radically lead in a century that desperately needs leadership.
We are going to end today with a book signing here. Those of you who have purchased the book, and if you haven't, there's a table outside to get one. But before we do that, I'd like to take some questions from the audience about some of the things that you've heard here today. Who would like to ask Lieutenant Governor a question? Here.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. You mentioned plenty of examples on how technology can change governmental services and how they relate to society. But I was wondering if you had any ideas or examples of how technology can change the fundamental political institutions of society, particularly the legislative process.
Well, it's interesting. One of the most remarkable things about this book and the book tour, besides trying to survive Stephen Colbert, which I did. I did Meet the Press 3 days later. I was so relaxed on Meet the Press. I'm thinking, how is this possible that I'm relaxed here and I'm still recovering from Colbert? Was meeting Newt Gingrich, Eric Cantor, Alex Castellanos, big Republican consultant, reading blogs from pollsters like Scott Rasmussen, the Republican pollster, and others, celebrating Citizenville. I got a call. This is a true story. It's probably 5 weeks ago, Saturday morning, early, 6:45 in the morning, from Politico, desperate to talk to me, saying, did you hear Newt Gingrich's comments at the CPAC convention, the big conservative convention? I said, no, I didn't. And why, what, attacking San Francisco values, what? They said, no. I said, but you should have no comment. I said, what do you mean no comment? I have no idea what he said. Well, he said that the antidote to so many of the problems, I'm paraphrasing, so many of the problems the Republican Party is having, finding itself again, can be found in former San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom's book, Citizenville. He said this at CPAC. I said, he couldn't have said that at CPAC. I said, he only had 10 minutes. I know there were 10 minutes speech. He says, he used most of the speech about you. And they said, you want to comment? I said, hold on. And immediately did what any good politician that is at a loss for words would do, called my press secretary, who's here, Deirdre. I said, Deirdre, what the hell do we say? How do we respond to this? And as soon as I asked the question, I realized the answer. And so I got back on with Politico, and I said, here's my comment. I'm going to have to reread my book. Well, Gingrich turned out to think I was sort of funny and got my email and reached out. Says, we should get together. You ever heard of Nuke University? I want you to come. Then I turn on, I kid you not, a couple nights later, this is a true story. I turn on, I'm flipping through and listening to that guy that people wanted to deport back to England because of his position on guns and Pierce Morgan. And there's Newt Gingrich talking about my damn book. This time, though, he's with Van Jones, who was saying, I agree, the book's good. I'm like, thank you, Van, for being there. A little balance. Well, Alex Castellanos doing the same thing. All these guys. I spent an hour and a half with Cantor last week and down in L.A. Interestingly, here's why, and it goes to your question. Republicans are doing a more effective job at using technology to govern than Democrats. We're not even in the game. We are dominating using technology to get elected. They're not even in the game. But from a governing perspective, they get it. Jarrell Iseman gets it. Project Madison. U-Cut was a program that Cantor created when they were in the minority to encourage people to find waste and duplication in government, and it was a platform for engagement. They have a program now where you can literally legislatively take a bill, amend it, and they'll mark your amendment and introduce your amendment on the House floor, citing your amendment to specifically your precedent point. They've been remarkably sophisticated using these tools of technology. They get it. Gingrich, just in closing, gets it. I think, and I've had these conversations. I'm going to do a town hall with him at the U.S. Conference of Mayors in June, where we're presenting to hundreds of mayors because we've created a Citizenville challenge of open government and transparency with mayors all across the country with an organization called Code for America. And we've got dozens and dozens of mayors that have signed up to these new principles of governance, which we're very excited about in a very bipartisan way. But his whole point is this. He's in a fight, turns out, with, and I'm now learning this, with Karl Rove, who's got the top-down super PAC idea, where he's going to pick winners and losers so that they don't have the problems they had in the last election, picking more conservative folks that can't get elected in generals. And Gingrich can't stand that. And he got, despite the fact he was a big beneficiary of some of the super PAC money, he got crushed by Romney and others top down that took him out in that primary. So I imagine he's more sensitive. But his is all about Ronald Reagan's small town version, bottom up, village, community, small town, rural and suburban thinking. And he believes technology can create that platform of bottom up thinking engagement and recapture some of the spirit of the party, the spirit of Reagan. Interesting. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think that's partially where he's coming from. So this book is not an ideological book, even though I'm pretty, I just came out for legalizing marijuana. There's not a statewide official in the state that did that. I mean, I'm out on a lot of these damn things. I tend to have a habit of saying what I think, which is not a good thing for me politically. So I'm hardly can be accused, though some did when I was mayor, of being conservative. But that was thank you. You said it. It's unbelievable. But I do appreciate folks on all sides of the political aisle embracing some of these core tenets, and those examples are in the book.
Way in the back over here.
Yeah, how close to being able to vote online are we? If I own shares in a company, I can vote on shares. Why can't I vote online?
Well, isn't it amazing? It was only a few months ago that we allowed you to register online in California. Isn't that ridiculous? California on the leading and cutting edge of new ideas and technology, the birthplace of life science, nanotech, and biotechnology, cutting edge of patents, discovery, and venture capital, was one of the 15th or 16th states to finally allow you to register online. So the idea of ever voting online is probably unrealistic in the short term. Here's why. I begin my book with a conversation I had with the president of Estonia. I know all of you are quite intimately familiar with Estonia. I was not as familiar and intimately connected with Estonia until the president came out to visit me. He didn't come out to visit me, but he had to use it as a justification for his trip, just to say hello to someone who's in politics, so I indulged him on his way down to Silicon Valley. And I'm sitting there, and I know he spoke English because I did a little research on him. But he had his translator there, as a lot of these foreign leaders always do. And I'm going on and on about, in fact, we're going to do free Wi-Fi in San Francisco, something that I was working with Larry and Sergey at Google. They were going to provide it. It got crushed in politics. That's another story. And I was telling him, we've got this pilot program, Mr. President, where you can pay, get this, I know, don't get too excited. I'll go slow for your translator. You can pay your parking meter using your cell phone. I know. And he's looking at me and going, I'm like, I know, it's impressive, isn't it? I said, it's pretty impressive. Yep, San Francisco. Leading edge of technology. He then literally, true story, he says, all right, I got this, to his translator. All of a sudden, perfect English. He goes, with all due respect, and I am respectful of some of your efforts, and it sounds like you're trying. He goes, in Estonia. I said, yeah, Estonia. Yeah, I know Estonia, yeah. He goes, we've been paying not just our parking meters for years, but our parking fees and fines, our property taxes using cell phones. We have a 200% penetration rate with smartphones, and we do online voting. I'm sitting here, that was a humbling damn experience, right? It's the old adage, a good thing in life to remember, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. It's just a good life lesson. My mom used to tell me that when I was a kid. I was a know-it-all at 6 years old. I know you were all perfect kids. So, Estonia's been doing it for years. And by the way, here's why. They just skipped an entire generation. They skipped the landlines. They don't have all these overhead wires like we do throughout the entire west side of San Francisco. Why the hell would you need it? I mean, you saw the other day, right? Big article in The Economist magazine. There are substantially more cell phones than there are toilets in India. It's like 70% of people have cell phone. Only 40% of people had toilets at their homes. World's changing. Digital divide is radically changing in terms of the access to these tools and devices. Now, the problem with online voting, they don't do it exclusively, is these hackers that he's promoting. And the fact you can't secure with absolute confidence that everybody who voted for X, not Y, based upon some algorithm or some manipulation of the same. And people want that paper trail. And until that can be perfected, I don't think we're willing to risk democracy in this state, let alone our country, with online voting until that absolutely can be addressed. How that gets addressed, I don't know, and a lot of smart people are working on it. But I wouldn't promote something unless I had absolute confidence as it relates to security, that it could not be hacked, and it certainly could be tracked and double-checked and verified.
Let's take one more question. Anyone over here? Here in the back.
Well, you don't have to answer it. A minute ago, you mentioned coming out. I just want to know if you inhale.
You know, I gave a speech at the Democratic Convention saying it's time for all of us to come out of the closet. And people are like, okay, I knew it. He has gelled hair. I knew it. The whole time, I always knew it. And I said, for legalizing marijuana. You know, it's interesting. I was not, I kid you not, I was one of those boring jocks where half my baseball team, this is bad. A couple of you went to Redwood High School, you can attest. Marin County in the 80s, just saying. Where it was everyone, it was like the easiest thing in the world to find marijuana. And that wasn't my thing. I'm dead serious. And if ever I wanted it, was just like, could someone get a beer or something? And it was like impossible to get a beer. But everyone can find pot. And it really, by the way, and you probably had, this is not something I came to talk about, God bless. But I think most of you probably had that experience one time in your life or know of someone that did. I mean, 750,000 people were arrested last year for marijuana in this country, 87% for simple possession. Here's a fact. If you're an African-American child, you're 10 times more likely to be arrested for drug possession than whites, and white kids are more likely to use drugs. How about that for a fact? This thing's a joke. And we got to stand up and tell the truth about it. I'm not condoning the use because that wasn't my thing. And I got 2 kids. I don't want to see them using and abusing. But I also have a bunch of bars and restaurants, and I watch folks there legally taking shots of Jack Daniels, and I can't reconcile the two. We can tax and regulate this thing. We can redirect resources in more strategic and thoughtful ways. We don't have to condone the use. We can actually get a handle on the use. And we can address the criminal justice issues in a thoughtful and legitimate manner. And own up to the fact that this war on drugs has been an abject failure. 42 years, $1 trillion later, it's been devastating. And you know the worst part about this? I kid you not, I have barely met a politician that disagrees with what I just said on either side of the political aisle privately. And it makes me sick to my damn stomach. And the worst part about it is you allow them to continue to get reelected over and over and over again, not telling you what they really think, telling you what they think you think they should think. And it pisses me off, breaks my heart. You know, in 2004, big deal, we did gay marriage for 30 days. And it was a big deal for 4,036 couples from 46 states and 7 countries. It was a big deal to their friends and families, to their loved ones, their mothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, kids, and grandkids. But in 2005 and 6, I remember being on there, going on Dr. Phil's show, going on Larry King, every day getting pounded, waiting for reinforcements. 2007, 2008, 2009. And by that time, I hadn't met any of my damn party or politicians that didn't disagree. They were all on board, but they didn't have the guts to say what they thought privately, publicly. 2010, 2011, finally O'Malley and Cuomo in New York and Maryland, and then, of course, Biden. And God bless the president taking a huge risk, standing on principle during an election. And I'll never forget that, and he'll go down in history for that. But what took us so damn long is because we care more about ourselves than you. That's what took so long. What's taking us so long on the issue of drug policy? Not one statewide Democrat was out on the 3 strikes repeal. Democrat. Go look on the website right now on the repeal of the death penalty. I think we should repeal the death penalty. It's not a deterrent. There are racial components of that. We spent $4 billion, waste money, $184 million I can redirect to offsetting your tuition increase next year if we just got rid of it here. How many statewide Democrats came out supporting the repeal of the death penalty? Look it up, not one. This is a damn shame. It's wrong. That's not leadership. And it goes back, why? If you want to move the mouse, you got to move the cheese. It goes back to money in politics, special interest, the persuasion industry, and the party system. These things are profound and they're real. And until we get serious about these things aren't going to change radically. They just won't. Don't believe they will. And if you do, show me the damn evidence. Seriously, show me the evidence. And I'm open to argument. I'm not an ideologue. I just haven't seen it. You deserve more and you deserve better. You may not agree with me on marijuana. And by the way, it makes me, I don't want to condone its use. I mean it. I don't want you to go smoke pot. I think you guys have better things to do in life than that. But if you believe in something, stand for something. Say what you think. Have the courage of your convictions. And that's why I say, and what I said before, and I'm not exaggerating, we are desperate for leadership in this country. Desperate for leadership in this country. Final point, I know we're way past our time. Because Michelangelo said it best. You've heard of him. He said the biggest risk in life, and I'd argue this in public policy, but in life, is not that we aim too high and miss it. It's that we aim too damn low, I'm adding the damn, and reach it. It's not that we aim too high and miss it. It's that we aim too low and reach it. Let's have a debate about background checks. Boy, what a disappointment. Talk about aiming to, even if that passed, how dare they? How dare they celebrate that as an excuse for leadership in a country that is under siege as it relates to the issue of guns and these weapons of war. So you all deserve better, and I am expecting better of all of you. Thank you guys very much for being here. Come buy the book if you haven't gotten it. Thank you.